receivers are like children. One, you're completely dependent. And two, you guys whine and piss and moan if you're not fed. There's no position that's more dependent on everybody else doing their job than wide receiver. And the fact that you guys don't understand that blows me away. It just absolutely befuddles me.
It is Mark Schlereth, Odyssey NFL Insider, host of the Stinkin' Truth podcast. So first off, how's the podcast going? What were you hitting on this week?
Podcast is going good. We were just talking about the teams in general, like the Baltimore Ravens, the falling apart of the Baltimore Ravens. Now the Buffalo Bills falling apart. Kansas City all of a sudden, like one week they look great, the next week they look average. If you're talking about NFL in general, and if what the thing you wanted was parity, you certainly got it, because I don't know that there's any team that I look at right now that's going, wow, that team is really good. Maybe you could make an argument for the Rams, but everybody seems to be struggling right now. And I don't know that it's going to get any better. So at some point, some teams will separate, but right now, everybody's pretty even in general.
I think that's a fair observation, and I wonder where you think the 49ers sit in that, because let's be real, especially when you factor in the injuries, their 4-2 record looks better than I would argue they've looked as a football team. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, and that win against the Rams was big time to be able to figure out a way to get that done. To be sitting at 4-2 and missing the majority of your offensive stars, if you will, and then some of the defensive injuries that you've had as well. I mean, it's amazing that you are sitting there at 4-2. That is incredible. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of teams that are injured right now, and it's one of my big pet peeves about how the NFL is constructed. So I'll just go back, and I hate to be the old guy in black socks on his porch shouting at clouds, but allow me to be the old guy in black socks shouting at clouds on his porch. The way we orchestrate, or the way we develop NFL teams, is we pay an exorbitant amount of money to quarterbacks, to wide receivers, to edge rushers, to left tackles, maybe to a dominant defensive tackle. Like, that's where our money goes. And where we try to save money is in the backup players. When I first got in the league and I was playing for the Redskins, every guy that was a backup on our football team had started somewhere else for 4 or 5 years and came to us and was a backup offensive lineman. And where teams try to save money is on the offensive line. So you may pay, your tackles big money. You may have to pay a guard that, get to that point money. But then all your backups are first and second year guys that probably shouldn't even be in the league. But that's what you've got, and you try to save money by paying those guys minimum wage, and then you have 1 or 2 injuries up front, and you're screwed, because the line of scrimmage is so important. And you can look at what Mike Vrabel's doing with the Patriots right now. You dominate the line of scrimmage. We make so much out of paying wide receivers and paying this guy and paying that. If you dominate the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively, you win regardless of who your quarterback is, who your wide receivers are, all that stuff. But if you get trucked on the line of scrimmage, you're screwed. You cannot win. I don't care who you are. And so it's just really interesting how we value and what we value, and how fantasy football seems to have affected, organizations for the most part.
Yeah, I don't have any centers, guards, or tackles on my fantasy team, Stink. I don't know if you do, but I tried to draft a couple, but they wouldn't let me. And just to take this to the 49ers, is this where you look at the Niners and you see this as maybe their biggest problem? Because they have a backup quarterback and they've got a backup tight end and backup wide receivers, and they've looked good at times, but it seems like the offensive line is the area where they're struggling.
Yeah, that and being able to stop people up front on defense and be able to put a consistent pass rush together. When you lose players there, and now you guys are, not only down Bosa, but now you're down Fred Warner, and man, it makes it really hard to win in the National Football League when you have injuries. And so, yeah, it's definitely a problem, guys. But it's a problem all over the place. It's a problem all over the league. And it really feels to me like the further we get away from actual football, the more injuries we get. And under the the guise, if you will, of player safety, and we want to keep our guys healthy, and so we're not going to practice, and we're not going to do this in full pads, and we're not going to have, like, I don't think you develop kind of a kinesthetic awareness of what's going on, and leverage, and how you push on a guy, and how your body reacts and all that stuff. And I think it's one of the reasons it just feels to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but across the board, it just feels to me that there are so many more injuries in today's game, and everybody wants to point, oh, they're bigger, faster, stronger, and I'm like, well, everybody is. So that's not. I don't think that's it. I don't think it's you're bigger, faster, stronger. I think that you're less skilled because you don't work at it. And what you do in practice doesn't necessarily mimic what you do in football games. And guys aren't prepared. They're not, quote unquote, calloused for that.
Stink, when you say that, it's fascinating because the criticism of Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers team under him, which has often been among the most injured in football, the thought is that he runs one of the more aggressive camps in the NFL. And the reason he does that is because of what you just said. Like, he believes the same thing, that you need to build up that sort of callus in your body in order to handle an NFL season. So, A, what's your reaction to the fact that that hasn't worked for Kyle? And B, what is your experience with a quote-unquote Shanahan-type camp?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was different in my time because, we put on pads twice a day and we went out and beat the snot out of one another. It was
right.
It was a different deal. I will say that one of the big things that I always thought Mike did an exceptional job of was once the season started, and that's obviously Mike being Kyle Shanahan's father. Once the season started, we were in pads for the first 20, 25 minutes of a Thursday practice. That was it. But we had the little foam shells on and helmets, and it was full go, no pads. I mean, what we did on the line of scrimmage was 100% identical without pads on to what it was if we had pads on. And I felt like, for me, we played faster on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday doing that when we got into the game, it was very similar to what we were doing. So I don't know. I'm not there at practices. When I go to San Francisco to be at practice, I only see the Friday practices. But I don't know if it's like, I believe in that style of practice. I believe that that's the best way to keep as healthy as possible. But I don't know what we're doing in the weight room. I don't know what we're doing tying everything together. It may just be incredibly bad luck. I have no idea. But man, it just is. It's just disappointing, and I was really hoping for Kyle in San Francisco that, hey, man, we'll get through this until the bye week. We'll get everybody back and guys will get healthy and maybe we'll be healthy throughout the remainder of the season. But it's an epidemic across the league right now with injuries.
And with the Niners, and you lose Fred Warner in the first quarter, as a player to see that, how devastating is that for the rest of the game to try to recover and go out there and play football?
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough, but as soon as that guy gets carted off, and you put your hand back in the dirt, you better have your focus on, otherwise you can get your ass kicked. And so that's just one of those deals that every guy that plays this game understands the danger of playing this game. And it's not a matter of if, it's when. There's 100% likelihood that you're going to get injured and that it's going to be, it's just the way the game is. And every guy willingly accepts that and understands that. And you feel for your guy and you say, man, that sucks. And love you, man. And then you go back out and you just try to get it done. So it just is the way it is. And you hate it, but you understand that's how it works.
Stink, what's the right way for the 49ers to approach the next few weeks? The trade deadline is coming. You've got a 4-2 football team, but it's a football team that's missing so many stars. So, how much capital do you want to give away to go after building around this particular group? What would you say?
Yeah, I would say that I probably wouldn't want to give a ton of draft capital away. This was one of those that, hey, you started that rebuilding process last year, young receivers, young defensive backs, some young players. You've had some injuries again this year. And you're sitting at 4-2, and you've done it with a kind of skeleton crew to this point, and so I don't know that you want to give a lot of draft capital away. I would say that you kind of stay the course. You see if you can get healthy. Listen, man, the rest of the league is pretty meager as well, and I think Kyle Shanahan's a hell of a coach. I think he puts his players in a lot of really good positions to win. And you've been doing it with a backup quarterback. You're sitting at 4-2, bunch of backup wide receivers. I mean, it's impressive what you've done so far. And there is nobody that's running away with this thing. I don't think the Rams are going to run away with the division. I don't think the Seahawks are going to run away with the division. So would I be willing to give up all my draft capital? Probably not.
Kendrick Bourne off the street is getting all the targets. Jauan also admitted to reporters after the game that he's not just playing hurt. He started detailing the injuries. He's like, I've got 5 broken ribs. All of these things, to me, after a contract holdout in the offseason, it sort of feels like he's barking and feeling sorry for himself. I see what's going on in Philly, where now they won't run the ball. They're also not winning games anymore. Like, I don't want to paint all wide receivers with a broad brush, but what's your take on that position and the way some of the guys are handling struggles in not getting targets?
Yeah, well, I mean, I want guys that can get 0 targets and throw some great blocks and be happy and excited and ecstatic about a win versus guys that, get 10 targets and get 100 some odd yards and 2 touchdowns and lose and throw a party, at the restaurant after the game. I just don't like the selfishness. And again, this goes back to the fantasy football we talked about when we started this show. You guys do realize that receivers are like children. A lot of them, not all of them, but most of them are like the diva ones are like children. One, you're completely dependent. 10 other guys have to do their job exceptionally well for you to sniff a ball. And 2, you guys whine and piss and moan if you're not fed. You're just like toddlers. And it's incredible. And like I've said this many times, like if you're going to whine and piss and moan, what I would like to do is take you down to one-on-one offensive line versus defensive line and let some defensive tackles put you in a guard and let defensive tackles beat the living piss out of you so that you understand what everybody else has to do for you to sniff a football. It is the ultimate team sport. And that position, to me, is the ultimate dependent in that team sport. We're all dependent on one another doing our jobs, but there's no position that's more dependent on everybody else doing their job than wide receiver. And the fact that you guys don't understand that blows me away. It just absolutely befuddles me.